Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Thursday, February 20th, 2025. She worked for years to get a federal job. Within a month, she was fired. Rose spent years trying to land her first job in the federal government. It ended up lasting just a few weeks. Rose's brief career as a federal employee ended last Thursday. I was winding down for the day, and then all of a sudden, I got a notification ping. She says she reached for her government phone, which had been issued to her just a month earlier when she took a new job at the Department of Energy, DOE. The message was from a coworker saying that she needed to check her email right away. She opened it up and found a letter telling her she'd been terminated. DOE finds that your further employment would not be in the public interest, the letter read in part. The 26-year-old was being removed from her position effective today. Rose was shocked, and she had plenty of company. Even longtime workers seemed confused. People who've been in the federal government 30, 40 years are like, "We have never seen this before. This is unprecedented," she says. But she didn't have much time to let her firing sink in. Her email was about to be shut off. She grabbed her personal phone. "I had to take a picture of the attachments because I didn't have enough time to send them," she says. By 11:30 p.m., she'd been locked out of her work email. Rose agreed to discuss her experience with NPR, which is identifying her only by her middle name, because she holds out hope she could work for the government again someday, and because she worries she'll be retaliated against for taking to the press. Just days before, President Trump had signed an executive order directing federal agencies to initiate large-scale reductions in force. Rose is one of thousands of early career federal workers swept up in those moves. The Department of Government Efficiency, overseen by Elon Musk, has also been pushing to slash the federal workforce. According to media reports, around 1,000 probationary employees were terminated at the Energy Department. Many were employees with less than 2 years of federal service. The DOE did not respond to NPR's request to comment on the firings. A dream job. Rose is the daughter of immigrants and grew up on the East Coast. For her entire professional life, she had wanted to work in the government. She'd done a few internships around Washington, D.C. before taking a job as a consultant. In that role, she'd work alongside federal workers on environmental cleanup and clean energy projects. Working with those federal employees inspired her to pursue a job as a civil servant. But she says she soon learned that getting a job in the federal government is a science in itself. Initially, she was rejected from several positions. Undaunted, Rose steeped herself in the language of the U.S. government. She taught herself an endless list of acronyms and bought a book on how to build a resume that would make her look more attractive to federal work. Then late last year, she got what she thought was going to be her big break. She had interviewed at the Department of Energy for a job helping to oversee a portfolio of renewable energy projects. She says that the hiring process was a months-long ordeal, during which she joked she told them everything except what my blood type is. In December, she got a call from Human Resources telling her she'd landed the role. I was with a friend at the time, and she just kept saying over and over, "I got the job, I got the job." It was going to be a turning point in her life. It really felt like my career was beginning, because this is the job I want, she recalls. Rose knew that Trump had just been elected, but the HR recruiter assured her that this wouldn't be a problem. "They told me that the precedent was in previous administrations. They have honored the people that have been hired." HR told her that she could join as late as February, but she was so excited she asked to start the job early. "I was like, please let me start in January," she recalls. Kind of a silly looking back now. I didn't even work there for a month until I got the boot. Imaga dad. Rose had to let her family know she'd been fired, including her dad, a military veteran living in Florida who was a big supporter of Trump. Before she'd taken the job, she joked with him, "If I lose this job, I'm going to pack my toothbrush, put all my things in the little hobo satchel, and be knocking on your door." Little did I know that door would be destroyed in the Florida hurricanes. Her father's house was ruined by hurricanes Helene and Milton, she says. For Rose, it's particularly bitter irony because her job was to try to help develop alternative energy sources. The work I was doing and supporting was directly related to climate change, which is why these natural disasters are on the rise, she says. Her dad was sympathetic, but when he heard about her firing, his response was, "That really sucks, but you'll bounce back." Rose doesn't feel particularly bouncy at the moment, but she doesn't seem angry at her dad either. If anything, she feels closer to him. I remember I was sitting at a dinner with my dad recently when he was talking about it feels like we are forgotten because as soon as the hurricane in Florida happened, and it was North Carolina, then it was California wildfires, she says. And there's a relationship between all of this. Federal employees feel forgotten. My dad, who voted for Trump, feels forgotten. Across the board, everyone feels this sense of loss. And like, I'm not being heard, she says. But she doesn't have much time to reflect. She has to find work. Bills aren't going to stop because I lost my job. Car payments aren't going to stop because I lost my job. Student loans aren't going to stop because I lost my job, she says. While she's searching for her new gig, she says she has thought about parking herself on the sidewalk outside the energy department on the off chance they might take her back. Trump administration yanks CDC flu vaccine campaign. One of the social media graphics included in the wild to mild flu vaccination campaign run by the CDC. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is stopping a successful flu vaccine campaign that juxtaposed images of wild animals, such as a lion with cute counterparts, like a kitten, as an analogy for how immunization can help tame the flu. The news was shared with staff during a meeting on Wednesday. According to two CDC staffers who spoke with NPR on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly. And a recording reviewed by NPR. During the meeting, leadership at the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases told CDC staff that the Department of Health and Human Services had reviewed the campaign and advised that it would not continue. The move comes during Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s first full week on the job as head of HHS. The wild to mild flu vaccination campaign sought to encourage people to get the flu vaccine. In particular, the campaign aimed to communicate that flu vaccination can lessen symptoms and the chance of getting severely ill, even if it doesn't prevent someone from catching the flu. The Trump administration's decision to pull the campaign comes in the midst of a brutal flu season that is still raging. More than 50,000 patients were admitted to hospitals for influenza during the week ending February 8th, the highest level in 15 years. Paid media for the ad campaign was ending on Wednesday. According to the current CDC and HHS were not immediately returned. The campaign sought to reset public expectations around what a flu vaccine can do in the event that it does not entirely prevent illness. According to the CDC's webpage describing the launch of the campaign in 2023, it was renewed for the current flu season. We found that it was very successful. People understood the message, and they were swayed by the message. Erin Burns, Associate Director for Communications in the CDC's Influenza Division, told the trade website Fierce Pharma in October 2024. The campaign was a response to falling flu vaccination rates since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And targeted groups at higher risks. The CDC's launch web pages said, especially pregnant women and children. The CDC campaign is a creative and effective way of conveying an extremely important public health message about partial protection versus complete prevention of the disease. Marla Dalton, Executive Director of the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases, told NPR in an email. While it was primarily digital, the campaign also found a home in public transit over the fall. Wild to mild branding was wrapped around trains in 4 major cities, and ads were featured at mass transit stations. According to a presentation from CDC in November, those ads reached more than 30 million riders and generated another 30 million digital impressions by the end of October last year. It's unclear how much time was left in the campaign, but it would have at least gone through the end of this flu season, and the materials would have stayed at the agency's website, one of the CDC staffers told NPR. As coal plants close, Colorado towns consider nuclear waste storage. Hayden Station, a coal-fired power plant, dominates part of the landscape between Hayden and Steamboat Springs in northwest Colorado. The power plant is expected to start shutting down before the end of the decade. Hayden, Colorado. For several years now, nuclear power has been trying to make a comeback in the U.S. The Biden administration, like nuclear's low carbon footprint, and President Trump has cited nuclear as part of his plan to unleash American energy. That's adding pressure to the decades-long effort to find a place to store the radioactive waste U.S. nuclear power plants produce. One place under discussion is the sparsely populated northwest corner of Colorado. Conversations are happening at places like the Wild Goose, a cozy coffee shop tucked inside an old grain elevator in the tiny town of Hayden, Colorado. A coal-fired power plant towering over this community is closing soon, and people are urgently pondering Hayden's future. The impacts are huge. There's a lot of great minds working together to figure out some of the impacts, because the impacts are huge, says Tammy Delaney. Town officials say the power plant has been providing more than half the property tax revenue to run Hayden schools. Fire department and other essential services. She and her husband Patrick own this gathering spot, and they're trying to help their own town transition. They recently converted old grain warehouses into short-term rentals and a hip wine bar. But last fall, the Delaney started hearing about a much bigger idea: replacing the dying coal industry with nuclear energy. Patrick is intrigued. There's a lot of great things about nuclear power, he says. I mean, a pellet the size of your thumbnail has the same energy content as 1,000 pounds of coal. That's amazing. Tammy on the left and Patrick Delaney posed in front of the Wild Goose coffee shop in Hayden, Colorado, in November 2024. The Delaneys have concerns about the idea of using trains to import spent nuclear fuel to northwest Colorado. But they also have concerns. To help facilitate the push for nuclear energy, a regional energy development initiative in northwest Colorado is shopping around the idea of hosting a temporary consolidated storage site for the radioactive spent fuel produced by the nation's nuclear power plants. Large concrete and steel canisters of the spent fuel would be loaded onto specially built, crash-resistant trucks and trains, and brought to a warehouse far from people. It wouldn't be built in Hayden. The talks about the storage facility have been happening in a handful of neighborhood counties in the west bordering Utah, but the Delaneys fear regional impacts. Obviously, a lot of concerns with transporting nuclear waste by rail, Patrick said. A decades-long challenge. Right now, nuclear plants store their waste on site in 35 states. The federal government has been trying to find a single place for them to send it since 1970. In 2021, Congress set aside money to identify places that might be open to building a temporary storage site until a permanent repository is secured. the Northwest Colorado Energy Initiative, which is focused on finding a replacement for the region's coal industry, responded. Last fall, at a series of low-key meetings, it introduced the concept of storing spent fuel. Craig Station, a coal-fired power plant near Craig, Colorado, in November 2024, signs of energy transition in the area are already visible, with solar installations in the foreground. There's an opportunity to set up the whole energy-related industry in this region of our state and secure some of the jobs and some of the homes and the families in this area, said Matt Solomon, the project manager for the NCEI. A few months ago, the group won a federal grant to start local discussions about maybe setting an interim waste storage facility somewhere in the region. It's not the Simpsons with bubbling green fluid, Solomon says of the waste that would be sent to temporary storage site. It's concrete casks with eraser tip pieces of metal that are cooling down. Other grantees include Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Eastern Kentucky, and Carlsbad, New Mexico. It's early in the process. And Solomon's talks are getting started in Colorado. But the waste storage idea is getting mixed reactions deep in the state's coal country. Craig, which is home to about 9,000 people and less than 20 miles west of Hayden, is also losing a nearby coal-fired power plant. Resident Sasha Nelson says she understands why the talks are happening. It's Nelson's job to help Northwest Colorado transition away from coal. She calls the talks about potential nuclear development critical to assess options for the future, but she worries about the waste component. How dangerous is it? It would break my heart because of our remoteness, because of the space that we still have available. That becomes a place where any project just ends, where we're, a waste disposal area, she says. Nuclear engineers have different views about how safe it is to temporarily store the radioactive fuel. Anna Erickson, a professor of nuclear and radiological engineering in the Woodruff School of Mechanical Engineering at Georgia Tech, says the nation has a good safety record. That the radiation around those casks is actually not that high. She says, those casks are regularly inspected today by humans with those Geiger counters that you've seen or other instruments. But in the future, we're looking to move in robotics inspection. Other experts have concerns. Edward Lehman, the director of nuclear power safety with the Union of Concerned Scientists in Washington, D.C., worries the fuel canisters could leak radiation if they're involved in severe crashes during transport or targeted by terrorists. A deliberate attack is essentially one way where you can maximize the potential harm to the community of that facility. He said, in 2012, report to Congress, the Government Accountability Office called spent nuclear fuel one of the most hazardous materials created by humans. The U.S. Department of Energy is asking communities that want to keep talking about hosting a temporary waste site to say so by this fall. It hopes to open a facility by 2038.